No.
How many
lives up in
people
the
here
hills.
is going into lockdown different than how you live your normal life? Because for me, it's like I don't. It doesn't make any difference. I'm still not going anywhere, seeing anybody.
So I know Chris's wife is at work, so I don't know who that other lady was there.
And Alex made it into LA just in time for us to go purple, into the purple zone lockdown.
Oh, there
What
you
does
go.
purple mean?
Means
Not good.
restaurants and bars are closed. So welcome to LA, except for outdoor dining.
Well,
and
welcome to the West Coast.
14-day voluntary quarantine after leaving or arriving. So
No, north to south, Courtney.
you're stuck here for 14 days, Alex.
And here in South Dakota, we have the worst COVID of the entire country, 60% infection. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, but you guys don't have a mask rule at all.
We don't have any rules at all. That's all I'll say.
Was that because of Sturgis, Victor?
Okay. All right. Everyone can hear me okay?
Yes.
I'm in a
Sound good.
hotel. Yeah. Okay, great. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Office Hours. If you are tuning in on YouTube, you can click down below and join us in Zoom. If you're in Zoom, you'll see a link there that you can join Mukano. That's where you can ask questions. We really depend on those questions to kind of keep things moving forward. If you see all these panelists here, our job is to talk about those questions. I would say answer them, but we don't know if we're going to answer them or not. We haven't seen the questions yet, but we'll talk about them. But what we recommend is for you to ask questions and vote on those questions early. We open the doors around 6, usually a little before 6, and I can't promise anything in the morning today. I was listening. I was getting set up. I got into LA at midnight last night, so I was still getting set up this morning, listening. There was drum playing. There was all kinds of things going on this morning. So anyway, it's coffee and tea and discussion. 6:40, between 6:40 and 6:43, we do the mic checks. Once we do the mic checks, the panel is closed, and that's what we're going to have for the day. At 7 o'clock, we have a general discussion, and that's really where your questions come in. If you ask those questions before 7, we're going to start jumping into it. Now, you can ask them during the hour too, but the best time is before 7. That's where you're going to get the best chance of people looking at those questions, voting on those questions, and moving them up. So anyway, at 7 to 8, we have a general discussion. From 8 to 9, we have something that's usually more focused. Today, we're going to talk about microphones. Today is the audio day, Tuesday. If you have questions specifically about microphones, go ahead and ask them today. Tomorrow, we'll talk about lenses on cameras. It's kind of starting a series of kind of moving through those pipelines and talking about it. Thursday, our second hour is going to be talking about museums and cultural centers and what they could be using, with relating to media and virtual events, and just kind of brainstorming as a group as to what might be possible. Friday, we're going to talk about comms, how we talk, what does our back channels look like for these events. And then Saturday, education. So those are our second hours that are coming up. And again, a quick reminder to keep asking those questions and keep moving them forward. Today, if you have questions about microphones, this is your day to ask them. So we've got a lot of great experts here. And so anyway, take that into account, and we will get going. Bill, I think, and Stuart, you should have control now. And Bill, go ahead and let's throw some questions out there.
Okay, here we go. The first one today comes from Ray Franklin. I'm Outdoora. He doesn't specify his OS or type of machine, but he says, how do I turn off all notifications on my principal computer so my screen isn't bombarded with notifications? I've turned off all one by one, but I'm looking for an easy all off on kind of switch.
To my knowledge, with the Mac, you can't turn them all the way off. You have to give it at least 1 minute that it can do it. My 1 minute that it's allowed to do notifications is between 9:59 p.m. and 10 p.m. because usually at that time I'm asleep. so then this long line of notifications all comes out. But I haven't seen a way to turn it all the way off. Jason.
Nope, Alex is right. But if you're in production, there's always the do not disturb on the side menu, and that'll shut them all off, just if it's ringing and bothering you.
Yeah, I think that you can have, but I think that there's at some point, even with do not disturb, you have to have it let
yes,
you give so I give it that 1 minute at some time that I'm not going to be around, and let it express itself as it needed. But I like you don't particularly appreciate it. I wish we could just have an all off mode. Go ahead, Stuart.
I think the process for Windows is very similar. And there was a question I was going to ask, and it's just totally gone.
Okay, next question.
Okay, moving on. This one comes from Jonas Dottel in Reutlingen. Best way to get a good audio signal when my laptop is pretty loud, using something like Krisp, or is there another way?
So I guess we're talking about getting rid of background noise. And I think it depends on whether you're trying to get rid of it live or whether you're trying to get rid of it in post. In post, there's obviously some filtering that can be done. When you're trying to do it live, there's a handful of filters. I think that there's actually a noise filter. One thing on Zoom is to actually turn off original sound. So the Zoom filters actually do pretty well at filtering out things like computer fans and so on and so forth if you don't turn on original sound. You won't get quite the same audio quality, but you also don't get all that background noise. So that's something to consider there. Go ahead, Jeff.
Get your laptop up on a laptop stand, get some air flowing around it. Hopefully that'll quiet down the fan somewhat, and get a microphone. Don't use your laptop microphone. So get a microphone, preferably a headset mic that gets closer to your mouth and farther from the fans and the noise of the laptop.
Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, and then one other way is if you use audio hijack, you can create a chain, and just put they have a little noise suppressor that you could put in the chain before you go out,
and then
so that works pretty well.
Grant and then Guy.
So the trick that I did is I put my laptop under my table. So now I'm in a way where I just clamshell it. And it's tucked right underneath my table, so the fan still goes a little bit, but it's got some barrier between, the tables between it and the microphone. That works.
You throw a moving blanket over top of that table and have it drape over it, and then you'd add even another layer. Of course, it would suffocate your poor little laptop down there, but it would work. Go ahead, Guy.
So my laptop is screaming right now with the fans on, and I'm going to be quiet, and then I'm going to turn on noise assist in the sound devices mix pre. And so here's what it sounds like with 0, none. That's -20 now.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the heavy lifting. The two big ones are Cedar. Of course, Cedar makes a box, and then but for less money, you can buy a Mix Pre 3 and get Noise Assist for it. Noise Assist is a $300 add-on to the Mix Pre. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Most important, if it's an older machine, make sure that fan is clean, and there's many different ways to do that. I would, if we're overworking our computers, so not eliminating the fan or inhibiting the fan is not a good idea. So that's why I think the first thing to do is take a look at that fan and make sure that it's clean and free of debris, and get it going that way first.
And one of the things, it doesn't work for laptops, but one of the things that people have done to some of their Blackmagic hardware that we've talked about here, we can't say that it's a good idea, I think, officially, but some people have replaced their fans with higher quality fans in Blackmagic products to you can get much quieter fans. This is not really a laptop problem, but if you're having issues with your Blackmagic hardware making too much noise, there are less expensive fans for some of those things. I still have a couple of the old 2ME switchers and 1ME switchers that have big fins on the back. And if you're willing to do 720, they're great because they make no noise. So that was really thinking outside the box when Blackmagic started, but they moved on to a more traditional chassis. Go ahead, Bill.
I just want to thank Jeffrey for that reminder, because I remember the first time I took the casing off my original tower computer, and I thought it was a mold experiment. I was living in Arizona. There was so much dust, and it had just been gathering that for the course of like 3 years, and I was aghast at how much junk had been pulled through those vents and gotten into my computer over time. So cleaning fan blades is genius.
Next question.
Moving on, it comes from Sonny Neufeld of Winnipeg, and Sonny says, is there a drastic difference between the $30 and the $300 video color checker charts?
300. You're just getting started. So the definitely color accuracy and color richness are the things that start to make a difference. I think for the average person, if you're not doing something really complicated, I would probably recommend a $30 or $50, chip chart, because the most important thing is that it all looks the same. So it doesn't really matter what the colors are for most of these things. Now, if you're using an X-Rite and you're actually calibrating to it, then it does matter. But a lot of times, if you're trying to get your colors correct, you can definitely you just want something that's a reference between cameras oftentimes. But if you're trying to actually color correct to cameras, then those numbers start to make a difference if you're actually going to sample them. So that's when you start spending more money on the charts, is when that color has to be exactly that color. And that's really the challenge that you get into. And those are, you'll start with, again, these $30 chip charts. You can get $300 chip charts. Then you start getting into, $1,500 and $2,000 color charts. I have a booklet around here somewhere here. I'll go grab it while someone does someone else want to say something? I can't see anybody else have. That's a chroma demand chart. That is one of the more expensive ones, and they come in all sizes and all prices. So you can get, there's probably like 30 or 40 different charts from DSC Labs. The chroma demand chart is one of them, but they have VFX charts and 3D charts and lots of different ways. And it's not just color. A lot of those charts will help you check focus and check resolution and so on and so forth as well. In
and
fact,
expiration dates too.
Yeah, the expiration dates I think are a good sale. I'm gonna grab one for you. I'll show you. Hold on one second.
Anybody else have a hand up out there, or are we all just gonna? We'll wait for Alex to get back.
Suffice it to say that $300 is the very much low end, and yeah, the little pocket ones will do just fine. It's really important to take care of them because the sun will absolutely destroy them. So absolutely keep them in their sleeve.
I assume you would want to fill the screen as much as you can.
Well, it depends on what you're doing, but generally you're filling the screen. So this is a kind of a baby version. This is DSC Labs, and this one is specifically this is the one I kind of carry in my bag when I'm shooting. And I'm shooting today in order this week. So the Camo line is the little Camo line book. So I think I showed this the other day, but this is the color one. This is a very simple color chart that we can use for it. But this little booklet comes with a variety of ones. There's a kind of a pure white and a grayscale chart. Some of the larger ones will have that all in one piece. You can see skin tones, and this is a resolution chart that comes with that one, so that you can take a look at it and really get a sense of what your resolution is. And then again, of course, this one's typically used. This is a focus chart. We typically use that for back focus.
So anyway, it looks like it has a gloss finish on it.
All of them have a gloss finish except for the resolution. And it just means that the blacks are richer. And then you'll also notice that some of the, and one thing I'm careful about is there's certain pages of this that are more important to me than others. So I make sure that those ones are on the inside when I fold it back up again. So, but
Can you provide a link to that?
It's DSC Labs. It's the way my rig's set up right now. It's hard for me to do it, but someone can do it. It's a cam book called Camo Line Cam Book. And this is the little one, but DSC Labs is the company. Someone can throw that in the Discord. But they're kind of the standard. The demand charts especially are the kind of the standard that you use on a video shoot. They have some new ones that I'm looking at upgrading because they have a new one that has a log grayscale that would be useful. But again, you can definitely get started with, and then don't worry about the expiration. If you keep it out all the time and use it every day, the expiration is probably pretty accurate because you're under a lot of lights and it'll slowly fade. If you keep it in your bag and you keep it in a sleeve most of the time, you can keep it past the expiration. I think this one expired in 2019. Go ahead, Victor.
So is the pricing because of the printing that is used?
Yeah,
it seems very excessive.
It's a very high resolution print, very accurate colors. And to do that well, you end up with a lot of gloss. That's the thing that you have to remember is that there's just a lot of them that don't make it. To get the accuracy, they test each one of them. It's a very complicated process to get it done. I'm sure there's some margin in there somewhere, but I don't think it's nearly as high as we would think. If you think about, these aren't something that you print thousands of at a time. You print, small batches of them. They're very accurate, extremely accurate. And, it's actually pretty hard to make them well. And then you end up with a lot that just get thrown away, or seconds, because they don't match what needs to be done. So again, I don't think that most people need charts like that, but they're useful. And a lot of times you can rent them for a specific show. You don't have to keep them if you're not going to use them all the time. But I will say that they make life a lot easier when you have them. So anyway, next question.
Hasmuk from the panel and from Cape Town, South Africa. Follow-ups or clarifications? At times, a question asked in office hour may need clarification after the show. So how do we manage that as panelists and attendees who may benefit from the follow-up? My Zoom meeting register and branding question yesterday needs a clarification.
We just bring it up again in the show. We just repeat it. So what's the clarification?
Yeah, no, yesterday it was mentioned that you need a Zoom account with 12 hosts to be able to do the branding for meetings. What I went back to Zoom, and with my single paid up account, when you do the register for a meeting, after you save the meeting, only then does the menu come up for branding that registration.
Got it.
What the mistake I made was to go in and edit the meeting, and that menu then disappears. So that's the only clarification.
Got it.
So
Okay.
So there's no need for any specific account except a paid account.
Perfect. That's great. Next question.
Eric Hall of Mount Vernon, Washington says, I'm trying to understand the differences between Resolve and Final Cut. Final Cut Pro has a magnetic timeline where DaVinci Resolve has a nonlinear timeline. Please explain what this difference means to a workflow.
Go ahead, Alex.
Sorry, pardon me. The difference, well, you could say they're effectively that Resolve is like all other NLEs. It's the ultimate expression of a kind of 20th century idea about how to do editing, which is to put clips in tracks, and audio in tracks, and video in tracks. And the advantage of that is that you can use those tracks to mean anything depending on what you're doing. You can say, okay, this clip is a cutaway, this is an alternate take, this is part of a VFX combination. But the advantage of that is that you can get stuff done very quickly and get things done, and you can work on your timeline. And if you have standards about where you put things on your tracks, then you can stick to them if you can. But it's quite hard to do that on a reel of 11 minutes if it's a feature film, or double reel of 22 minutes, especially very hard to do over a 2-hour movie, because sometimes you may need to have a clip in a track for some other reason. The weird thing about Final Cut from that point of view is it doesn't have tracks, which means that you actually are defining what a clip is on the timeline based on what it's being used for. Is it an alternate clip? Then you have a way of saying this is an alternate clip. I'm going to choose between these, or this clip is being used for this or for that. Which means the advantage of that is that you can do turnovers very easily, because essentially as Final Cut knows why you're using this piece of audio and what it's being used for, then the turnover to the audio department, in theory, is very straightforward, because they know exactly what all those clips are being used for and where they should be going and how they should be grouped in the digital audio workstation.
Good.
The catch
Good.
is with Resolve let's put it this way. Resolve is the one that will probably be the winner of the 20th century style video editing software. It's getting better and more reliable, faster than Adobe Premiere is and Avid is, just due to the investment that Blackmagic are putting into it. They're putting much more investment into it because it sells lots of hardware from Blackmagic, so that means it doesn't even cost very much. And when it comes down to it, it's not the features that matter, it's how much it costs, because essentially that's what made Avid succeed. It wasn't better than film editing, it was just a lot cheaper. And so the money people said, let's move over to Avid. But on a day-by-day basis, if you are in practice integrating with lots of other people, professionals in lots of other departments, VFX people, sound people, color people, then Resolve is going to be, in the long run, in practice over the next few months, as far as we know, is going to be the one that helps you integrate with all those folks much more straightforwardly. So Resolve is for workflows that include lots of other people of different kinds of jobs, whereas Final Cut is much faster and much more straightforward to use if it's between you and other Final Cut editors. So that's the general overview of the main difference between them, is the fact that it's much faster for Final Cut is much faster for creativity, for the creative side of editing, putting stuff together and getting stuff done. and you don't have to go back afterwards and try to explain what you've done. Because what the Final Cut timeline has, it encodes your artistic intention. As an editor, you put that there for a reason, and the reason when another editor looks at it or another person looks at the timeline, they know what that's there for. Whereas the problem with other timelines is, what is that clip doing there? I don't know what that's doing there. And knowing what track it's in theory, should be the answer. But in practice, sometimes that's a cutaway, sometimes that's the C camera, sometimes it's a VFX combination. So who knows what's going on?
And I find that as a Final Cut editor, I've gotten myself caught in Resolve that I move things, and you just assume that when I move these things, all the things that are related to them will move with it because you're just used to that. You're used to like, I just cut the stuff and all the stuff was going to move over or whatever. And I've missed a couple of tracks up above and end up with some off cuts because I didn't see it as well. Go ahead, Bill.
The thing that attracted me to Final Cut in the early days, and it still is today, is its management of metadata and the flow of that through your project. I was astonished in my first couple of years with Final Cut in that the camera metadata from the original shooters was flowing into my browser. I was adding and appending metadata in the form of keywords and things that helped me organize and find things. Then all of that metadata was flowing into my timelines in a way that I had never seen before. And when I exported and finished a project, that metadata traveled with it to the extent that I went back on YouTube after about 3 years after I had posted a thing, and I looked at the YouTube video, I brought it down to my desktop, I opened up this isolated file, and it had a link all the way back to my name on the camera it had been shot with.
Which is both good and bad.
Yeah, you have to be aware of the fact that it's going on. But that means you can really make things quickly changeable.
We're going to move through this really quickly. Courtney and then Stuart and then Sky real quick.
Just a follow-up for either Alex to explain, is the cut line, the cut tab, cut page, thank you, on DaVinci Resolve similar to the magnetic timeline on Final Cut?
It's still track-based. It's just a lot easier. It's just simpler. It doesn't show you as much detail. So if you want to hack something together really quickly, but I don't think it does any kind of magnetic changes. It's still a track-based editing. But again, it makes it a simpler look. I don't use the cut page at all. I mean, I'm sure that maybe I'm missing something, but I just go straight into edit. Go ahead, Stuart.
That editing behavior you just mentioned a few minutes ago, where everything follows and shifts along the timeline, it's actually a setting in Resolve and it can be told to do it. It was actually one of the first things I turned off.
Good, Sky.
And a lot of,
both Phillips and flathead are screwdrivers. It's just depending on which tool do you need. So if you're within within an Apple environment, then you're locked into the Final Cut world.
I don't know if you're locked in. I mean, all of them run on the Mac. Reality is
you don't run Final Cut on a Windows machine. That's my point.
Yeah, the reality is that I think that if I was going to bet, I think that the two winners, the two that are going to last the longest or be the most successful are probably Final Cut and Resolve. I don't think that Premiere and Avid have the legs to. I think they're just old architectures, and they're not going to be able to compete with, $300 once. Like both of these companies have taken on you're going to pay $300 once. You're never going to have to pay for an upgrade, and we're going to keep on making it better. Final Cut, when we work with social media folks that aren't trying to work in Hollywood, aren't trying to get a job, they're all using Final Cut because they have to get stuff out fast. They have to get things, they have to move things quickly, and they want to be artistic, and they just want to throw it out there, and they can put it on a whole bunch of machines for $300, and so they, so I think that there's, I think that is the one that we see most social media folks using. And then the much more technical one is Resolve, and it just keeps on building into this beast, that there's a bunch of technical shows that I'm working on that I can't do it in any other platform. And so, I can't do it in Premiere or in Avid or in Final Cut, to be honest. And so I think that Resolve, solves that other side of that. Unless you need to learn Premiere to work somewhere or Avid to work somewhere, which is valid if you're working in legacy with legacy pipelines is what I would call that.
There you go.
So if you have to integrate with legacy pipelines, then Premiere and Avid are worth knowing. But if you are building up a new pipeline, I'd probably build it around, Final Cut if I had to move quickly and creatively, and Resolve if I had to build, kind of a heavy moving, platform that's going to do a little bit of everything.
And that Final Cut is Apple only, and Resolve is cross-platform.
Yeah, but I think I think the problem really is if we've talked about this a little bit in the past, that for creatives, if you look at what we got previewed on M1 chip, I don't see how PCs stay competitive in the next 2 or 3 years. Like, it's not, for creative specifically. I mean, if you want to run Excel, you can probably run it on anything. But if you're talking about, video and 3D and everything else, you're not going to be able to compete with that platform unless you reproduce that platform. The only way to compete with what Apple's doing is to put all of those components into a single chip. And I think it'll take PC manufacturers 5 to 10 years to do that. I think that's going to be a problem, for them. And I think that they may not believe that at the beginning, which will cost them another couple of years. And so I think that it's but when you look at the performance specs of what a Mac, and the new Air is running faster than the fastest MacBook Pro. That is Hello World. That's the first chip that comes out of the factory. That should terrify everyone that isn't on the Mac platform as far as from a creative perspective, because that is an incredible performance, jump. Go ahead, Stuart, real quick.
2 things. Firstly, it doesn't matter which NLE you use. Get into the habit of not updating the software in the middle of a production.
Yeah,
Trust me, that will mess you up.
Yeah,
no. But the other point I would like to make is, especially on the M1s, single-threaded operation. The Geekbench scores are showing, yes, it's awesome for the dollars, but multi-threaded operation, it's still not competitive. So it'll be interesting to see if the software for editing that uses that multi-threading can stay ahead. But in the end, it's going to catch up.
Yep. Next question.
Next one comes from Grant Whitehead on the panel. I need to get a basic Zoom device in 6 hotel ballrooms just to see what's going on. A simple wide shot, remote controlled. Should I use Portal TV, or are there any other ideas?
Eric Hall has been using a Raspberry Pi. Just want to say for the record. I don't know how you'd remote control it, but he had a little webcam, and he's not here today, but he had a little webcam into a Raspberry Pi that seemed like a pretty efficient little setup. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, you'd have to make a gimbal for that to make that, a remote gimbal for that to make that happen. But my question is, do you just need the camera, or do you need a whole system to see? This is
just for review. This is like a witness camera, right? I mean, I would put a wide angle. I put like a wide angle webcam into a Raspberry Pi, and if I can figure out how to run it.
If it's just camera, we got the Mevo makes the Mevo Start, which runs over NDI. You can also get the USB to Ethernet adapter, so that way you can put it through a network if you have a network cable option. But that's an option right there. It's small. Yeah, you can put it in the corner of a room, and it captures a pretty good display.
I mean, there's definitely IP-based security cameras that, if you don't want to do Zoom, that can just pump out video. But if you're trying to get it into Zoom specifically, I think that that's probably obviously you can get up to a Mac Mini or some kind of Nook or something else like that with a. But I think that, again, I was kind of impressed that Eric Hall was having it work at all, on a Raspberry Pi. I was like, wow, that actually works. So, and it seemed like the frame rate was reasonable. I think that I might have to test it a bit to figure it out, but it could be an interesting way to do that. Go ahead, Jeff.
Just a clarification about Eric's setup. He's not running Zoom on the Pi. It's just converting his camera.
Oh, so I don't know. I thought he was running Zoom on the Pi. I was very impressed.
Not yet, he says in chat. Not yet.
Oh, okay, got it. All right.
So what about the Portal TV guy? Have you got a
Portal
TV?
Yeah,
I was gonna.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to mention the Portal right now is signed in via your Facebook or a WhatsApp ID. So if you had 6 of them, you'd have to actually have 6 of those accounts. Otherwise, it could work. But when you're trying to do the accept incoming call, it's not like your Zoom rooms where you just see them pop up and appear in your list to invite. So that's kind of a drag because you don't want to put your Facebook account. Well, you can't have 6 of you anyway. So you'd have to have like 16. So it's not really going to work the way that you would want it. You'd probably have to do 6 Zoom rooms with NUX or something along, some
And
cheap
beyond the
computer.
Raspberry Pi, there's a lot of little cards that are $200 or $300 that are very powerful. I mean, you can encode 4K on them. There's a lot of, so you can get things that you can build a little case for that you could put a webcam in that I'm sure that you could run Zoom on. So I think that trying to build some kind of all-in-one little box would probably do it. Courtney, you were pointing to something that I didn't see.
Yeah, that's one of the little stick PCs. It runs Windows, so it'll run Zoom, and it has Wi-Fi, and there are versions with networking. So you could just plug a camera into this, and it works fine.
Next question.
About $125.
$125.
Next
but
question.
probably for $300 a room, you could probably get a pretty solid system, is my guess. Yep. Next question.
Eric calls back with another one. What's the process to match color between multiple cameras from different manufacturers?
Well, that's where you really need a chart. That you have to you need the chart to figure it out, because it's even if they're the same manufacturers, if you have different lenses on them, every lens, the coating is going to be different. It's going to have a different flavor to it. So you're going to have to tie all those back together. Even the same lenses sometimes will have a slightly different hue to them. So you definitely need a chart to do that. There's a lot of different ways to do it. You can do it with a vector scope. But what I tend to do is, see if I can find. So I take something like this that is big enough that I can do it with, and sometimes they're a square, sometimes they're a circle. I have one camera on this in the center part, and I do the circular transition so that I can cut this circle. It's not a circle, but this oval. I can cut a circle out of it in the center. Then what I do is I have on my switcher, I can see the inside is the camera I'm trying to match, the outside is the new camera. And you'll see a line where they don't match up. And so then you start to play with your shader. You play with your shading controls on your ATEM or on your camera until they match. It's really hard to do that without a paint box if you have a camera this is where things like Blackmagic, this is where it starts to really shine on a multi-camera shoot, because you have a lot of fine control through the switcher to really tweak the color of the camera. And in very, very minute increments, in ways that are very difficult to do in a traditional camera, especially at the same price point. So when you get into larger professional cameras, you have R-G and G-R and all these little controls that you kind of pull things in and out and try to match them. And then you have paint boxes that basically connect to those cameras and let you do a little bit more control to them. But after making a lot of fun of the way I spent about a year or two making a lot of fun of the way Blackmagic did it, because I grew up with Sony paint boxes and everything else, and so the way that Blackmagic approached it, the DaVinci approach, made me crazy. But I will admit it's a superior solution. So after years of using it. And so it'll let you do all the fine control to tie all those cameras kind of back in together and make them look exactly the same. But you need to have a reference that both cameras can see, that you can kind of match it. And it has to be a wide variety of colors. You can't match it to a gray card or to a black and white card. You need all those different colors across the gamut to make it work. The first step is making sure that first camera looks exactly the way you want it. The next step is to tie it all in. Now this is refined. You can obviously, the most common way to do this is auto white balance all the cameras to get, just white balance all the cameras to a white card. That will never get as close to it if you don't, without a controlled environment and really tightening them all together. And so, but it's okay. I mean, that you can get away with that. It's going to be close. But I think that, we spend hours on our cameras to get them all, into the same place. The thing to know is that you are always going to calibrate to the lowest common denominator. So the camera with the least amount of control is the one that controls the color, because you can't get it to it. So if you have a cheap little camera and you want it to match all the other cameras, you have to make that one look relatively good and then use the ones with good tools to go down to that one, which is a little bit of a bummer. It's why we try to keep all of our cameras to be the same manufacturer or the same model if we can. Because it makes it a lot easier to get the same. There's just so much in color science. It's not just the reds are the reds and the blues are the blues, but how do the reds get to the blues? And that's all color science that's different in every single camera. So it can be very challenging to mix and match those cameras. Go ahead, Stuart, and then Jason.
Just following up from what Eric's asking in the chat, can we get a description of the differences between a paint box and a camera control unit that you'd find in the back of a broadcast truck?
Well, typically the paint box will talk to the camera control unit. So the camera control unit is an interface that says, I'm going to send all these controls out to a camera. Typically you're hooking it to a big fiber connection. And so that, there's a SMPTE fiber cable that's multi-threaded that has comms, and it has, and what you do is you have one single cable that can now go out to a camera and send it comms and returns and controls and get its video back, and you don't have to have a bunch of cables all mashed up. You do that with CCU. So the CCU has all of those things. It has the SDI out, it has SDI in, it has comm ins, it has all these other so oftentimes audio outputs from the camera. All these things are all in a box that can be rack mountable, that sits in the but then it has just one cable that goes out to the camera, sends controls and comms, and pulls audio and video and all those other things back from the camera. So a paint box oftentimes connects to that CCU instead of the camera. It can connect to the camera, but it can connect to the CCU, and then basically you're painting the camera. So the CCU does not control the paint it doesn't paint the camera. It just simply gets a lot of information to it. The paint box itself is something that is designed with knobs and so on and so forth that will let you control the color and color and exposure. And then you have, the shading units are just, they have a lot of that in it, but they have big joysticks that you can move to adjust iris primarily. Generally, once you've color corrected your cameras, the only thing you're doing during a show, if everything went well, is adjusting iris. So you're just opening and closing the iris so that all the cameras look like they have the same exposure. If you did the color correction correctly. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, longtime friend of the panel, Doug Johnson, has a really cool website called LUTMath. I have not actually loaded LUTs in with this, but apparently it works pretty well.
There you go. LUTMath?
Yep, lutmath.com.
Okay, very good. Next question.
I'm a little on the fence as to whether that we should hold this for mic or not. It's Paul Wallace's question about whether there's a decent mixer you could fit in your pocket. Do we want to handle it now, or do we want to wait for the mic?
You can do a mixer. It's not a mic question.
Okay. So he's looking for a decent mixer that you can fit in your pocket.
It depends on what you're mixing. I mean, if you have, I can fit this in my pocket. This is the Mix Pre, but I have cargo pants, so I can fit that in my pocket. As far as it depends on how big your pockets are to decide what you can actually fit. Go ahead, Bill.
You said decent, not fabulous. So these little Behringer micro mixes, they're 1/4 inch in, 1/4 inch out. It's got 3 little relatively quiet, decent things. So if you're not looking for audiophile quality, and I think they're only about $40 or $50.
Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, I would say same kind of thing with the little Rolls mixers. Mm-hmm. Quality may not be top notch, but they're really compact, and you could probably put one of those in your pocket.
I mean, the real challenge with all of these is that as you start, the cost of these little boxes, the cost of the preamps in a high-end unit are the same as the whole box that you're dealing with. And so, and that cost is not just by itself worth it, but generally relates to the quality of the components. And I mean, everything is about, for me, everything is about the noise level, the line noise, or the pipeline noise that occurs. And so when you start adding these little ones that are inexpensive, you're adding a lot of hiss to your analog chain, which is a bit of a bummer. Go ahead, Stuart.
We've all just assumed that Paul was after an audio answer, not a video answer. If he is after a video answer, I could say a tablet with running Android and a web browser will control vMix remotely.
Yeah, I think that for us, a mixer in the U.S. at least is an audio question. But
yeah, audio mixer, audio.
But we would typically call it a switcher. But I do know that elsewhere, a video mixer can be a video mixer. Go ahead, Stephen.
And then if you want good audio, buy it right now, because everything is gone.
Yeah,
even Think can't sell amps right now, and that used to be the go-to hobbyist high-end amp place. And yeah, they say come back in a year.
Yeah, I mean the ATEM fire is caused a massive disruption in audio gear, so we may see some issues for a while. Go ahead, John, and then Courtney.
We've had some luck using the Roland Go mixer. They have a Go mixer and a Go Mixer Pro, which takes an XLR that lets you connect it to iOS devices. It's got real small knobs, but it's not too noisy. And a lot of musicians like to use it for doing recording, but we used it out in the parks when we needed to do some mixing.
Courtney?
Yeah, one problem with the Rolls and some of those other smaller mixers that they showed is twofold power. Usually they'll run on a 9-volt battery, and that won't last very long. And the second is they don't provide any kind of microphone powering. So if you're trying to use, phantom power, 48 volts, that's not going to do it for you. The Zoom, our Beach Tech, there's a whole series of companies that make adapters used to design to bring microphones, higher quality microphones into DSLRs. You might use those, although I don't know if they mix too much. They're more like level shifting and stereo, stereo XLR in to mini plug out. But along those lines, you might find something. But be forewarned that power is going to be your biggest problem unless you're powering it off a wall wart or something.
Go ahead, Greg.
I was going to say, another option could be like a Zoom F6 or something like that. It's a little square piece. It's not really much of a mixer. I guess it does. You can mix it. It's more of a software kind of menu-driven mixer, I think. But it's also a recorder, and it looks like a decent piece. For that matter, the Tascam, what a DR70 or whatever. Those are fairly good too.
Question?
Sky Gleason from here on the panel is in with using Zoom in an iPhone. How do you output a 16:9 image and not a 4:3?
So yesterday, the
Hallmark.
The Hallmark channel calls us and says, "So all we really are going to be using is Zoom, period." Yeah. And so
you can't do it with the phone. The Zoom. Like they have to scale it up. Zoom is the only one that I don't understand it, to be honest with you, how Zoom missed this. It keeps on missing it. Like every update, you just go, why are they not fixing this? This is every other video chat system other than Zoom scales the horizontal scales up horizontal and crops the top and the bottom. Every single one. Except for Zoom. Zoom gives you what happens is your 4:3 that's your sensor. That is actually what the sensor is.
Yep.
And so it's just Zoom is I don't understand it, but it will pillar you because it's just saying, hey, I got the whole sensor. I'm just going to give you the whole sensor there. And literally they're the only ones that do that. And it is horribly frustrating, for a lot of us, because it means that, everybody who connects with an iPhone is pillared, and so it's a frustrating problem. The best way to fix that is to use something other than Zoom to do a point-to-point connection with your phone. It is, but if they're going to use Zoom, then you need to, another way to do it is to find a way to connect to Zoom.
I have a second laptop with a little dongle I can bring my DSLR. I got it.
So there's no way to do it otherwise.
And can't you just pinch Zoom out a little bit on your phone's output, and won't that fill the raster?
I don't think it will.
No, because Zoom. Yeah, that's the issue. So
it's one of the more odd things that Zoom does so many things so well, and then you just go, why? This is been a known problem for at least. I mean, I've known about it since I started using Zoom, and I've sent things in, and
I'm sorry. I just want to apologize on Hiddleston that I didn't mean to poke the dog. Sorry.
Anyway, go ahead.
Not a problem. It's added to the Post-it note file.
You should that Post-it note should be one of those extra size Post-it notes, and it should be in 4:3. Make sure to cut it in 4:3. Most Post-it notes are 4:3, but make it 4:3.
Stuff on the edges,
and then put some stuff on it, and make a big black one, and just go. You're the only ones. You're the only ones that are left behind. Anyway, go ahead.
In hot pink, not yellow.
Grant. I think you should do it black with a silver Sharpie as well. Like to really lay it out there. Anyway, go ahead, Grant.
With a knife.
Even just a hidden feature where you could double tap.
Yeah.
And it pops it out. Like just as simple. But the other trick you could do is you could use a video conference app that'll do like a H323 like a connection. You could do a SIP connection into Zoom. So there's always in the Zoom invite. There's all those extra ways of connecting. You could do it on your phone if you had to do it on a phone.
I just keep loading in all my gear, and all these TV stations go, nope, we just want FaceTime. Nope, we just want Zoom.
Well, it's because they don't know how to do anything else. But again, they can
get
still,
it.
You can still do FaceTime or Zoom. You just do it through your computer, not through the camera. Like they just want to use that thing
through the
so
phone,
you can say, but you don't have to do it through the phone. You just, all they care about is that it comes out with audio and video through Zoom or Facebook, FaceTime or whatever. So you can still use your computer and other things to do it. You just don't tell them, and they'll just think, wow, that camera has such a short depth of field. Courtney.
Does Zoom on the Samsung phones or the other brands outside the garden give you 16:9? I haven't used Zoom on my Samsung phone. I don't know.
I don't know, but it's not something that can't be done. Like it's not like Apple's holding people back, because every other service, including Apple's own FaceTime, does 16:9. So it's it's a super simple call to just.
So Alex, I'm taking the answer is no.
No.
Okay.
Can't.
Next question.
All right. Next question.
Moving on, Mikael Fredriksson of Gothenburg, Sweden says, have you seen that Aaron Parecki built, is it Parecki? It's something like that, built a USD 16 tally light for ATEM using the M5 stick, and he has a link there.
I've not seen that. Sounds great. Go ahead, John.
It's very fun, and it turns out the tally light can be used as a switcher. So when you hit the tally light, it switches it on the ATEM.
Oh, that's cool.
He has a video of building it, but I think it'd be fun to really make something up there. But I was rather impressed with it. He's an amazing guy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. He's great. Go ahead, Sky.
I happen to have been in Sweden with my theater company. So Bill, I think it's pronounced Göteborg.
Göteborg?
Göteborg, yeah, I think.
Yeah. You should get Aaron. Aaron's on in Discord. I think he shows up here every once in a while. Maybe we get him on and show it off.
It's a beautiful city, beautiful on the West Coast.
Next question.
Learned something today. A. Mitchell, Washington. Greg Curda was. What was the final outcome of your Final Cut Pro 10 to Pro Tours emergency yesterday? Please walk us through your solution process and experiences. We talked about this earlier.
Yeah, I'll give you a brief summary. It's a kind of a three-part answer. Solution number one, since I have a deadline on this on this piece, so I'm just getting all of the elements and I'm going to recut it myself. So that's the fastest thing for me to do. Second solution is I'm going to rely on my more brilliant brethren here on office hours to help guide me through the transition. There is some third-party software. I think there's a couple of things that will do the trick, but a few of them well-known. I just don't know how to use them. And the third thing is to find out whether this guy is going to stay on Final Cut, and if so, he's going to have to buy the software, and we're going to have to go with that solution. So, what is it, Chris? What was the name of the app?
I'll look it up. We have it on one machine. You're right. It is a bummer. It's $150. We put it on one machine. It is not the machine that I stole from the office when we went into lockdown.
It's like something X7 or X.
No, X to CC or X to Pro. Those are the intelligent assistants.
X to Pro. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right. It is it's like $1.50 or something like that.
Right.
Let me do it. Let me do a little looking, and I'll text you.
The good news is you'll learn it. The good news is you'll learn it fast, because the best drug for learning is adrenaline.
Yeah, the thing is, I don't have the material, so he's going to have to do that on his end. He's in LA, so he's going to have to do that on his end.
Good.
Anyway,
go ahead, Stuart, real quick.
Just real quick, Peter Moore in the panel has actually dropped out and come back, and I've been monitoring him through the chat. And yesterday's discussion about the ATEM Mini and being an input one, that's where Peter was today.
Oh, there you go. Next question.
Okay, Greg. A. Mitchell's of Washington says Greg Curda was the final out. What was the final? Well, that's the same thing. How did that get there? Okay, we're going to do it this way. Tony Mobley of Newman, Georgia. Based on your earlier comments, Alex, should an educator learn DaVinci Resolve if they have not started a workflow yet for student enrichment and project-based learning?
Nope. You should learn Final Cut. You should learn Final Cut. Don't. DaVinci Resolve for education would be like driving an M1 tank to the grocery store. You know, like it's not like it, there are technical reasons to do it, but I would not learn DaVinci Resolve as an educator's toolkit because you have to produce so much content so quickly, and it's just you by yourself, and you're not integrated into a complicated pipeline. I wouldn't do that. If I was an educator, the very first thing that I would learn is Keynote, get really good at it, because you can build incredible videos just with Keynote. And I think it's probably as a Mac-based educator, Keynote is the most important application you can learn and get good at, and really get good at it. Not like, oh, I can put up some, like presentations, but there's all kinds of animations, and you can have things swing in and move around. And, there's a lot of things that you can do with it. After that, Final Cut and Motion, I think, are pretty powerful tools as far as building more complex pieces that you can make there on an iPad. Something like LumaFusion, I think, is a great app to do those things. But those are the kind of things that, as an educator, I feel like educators would spend so much time trying to learn how to use Resolve in a way that, and it would be heavy. You're really trying to, like, how do I quickly turn something over? Go ahead, Grant, and then Bill.
Yeah, I was just going to give an example of Resolve, the free version. Just this week, I had someone who had to record a Zoom meeting, and what was really great, it was a presentation. And so in Zoom, the cloud recording, we were able to separate the screen share as a full 1080 and the talking head as a 1080. And then I was able to throw them a little PNG file as a template that sat over the top, and then they just slid in the I know you would hate that, Alex, that type of talking head in a box thing, but it worked great, and Resolve worked awesome for it. Just the free version on Mac or PC was perfect to just do a very simple thing. But I agree, I would choose to do it in Final Cut, but there is an option and a free option.
Good. Bill, and then Fenwick.
Well, I didn't want to get too far away, but in the presentation I did yesterday, I had, and thank you again,
How
Jeffrey,
did that presentation go?
It went really well. It felt like it went really well. People said nice things about it, so I'm hoping it went okay. But in working with Jeffrey beforehand, we were trying to figure out how to get the ATEM Mini to do the switch to my phone, which is running Keynote, which was great. I had a couple of videos embedded, and I know there's always been an issue with getting the audio out of an embedded video in Keynote back into Zoom under the restrictions that I was working under. So when I fiddled around a little with using loopback and those things, and I really couldn't lock it down in time, so I didn't want to mess with it. But is there a clean path for getting audio out of a iOS device into Zoom when you're doing a share like that?
I don't know. I'd have to test it. I admit that my use, the way I use Keynote, almost never incorporates video with audio. Like it's just the way I work. So I don't, I wouldn't know it as well, because what I do is if I play a video, I'm talking over it. And so I don't, it's just my style. Well, and it's probably because you work in events, and in events, you never use your presentation tool for video. So I think that I just get used to the fact that when I want to play video, I play it out of a playout device. And when I want to do, everything else, all my keynotes are built around the idea that I'm talking over it, or I'm interacting with it. I'm not just playing something for people to watch. I can see that that'd be very valid to do. I just haven't done it, so I don't know. Fenwick, and then Sky, and then Guy. Real quick, we're going to go into speed round.
Yeah, real quick. I just wanted to ask Grant, did you when you did that recording, did you do the 2-up through your Zoom room? Is that how they record it, or you use the cloud recording on Zoom?
Cloud recording, and so then you get the separate files that are synced. Right. And so you can drag them straight in as 2 separate tracks. Yep. And then just resize them, and it's done.
And we do that, by the way, with rooms with the dual head, so that we get their presentation and their video, and it works unbelievably well.
I gotta do this. I gotta build one of these Zoom room recorders.
Well, you have two outputs out of your computer, and then in the web interface you say that we had never done it. We had something we had to do last week. We had to figure it out. It was life changing. Like I was like, I have spent so much time trying to figure out the way a way to have the presenters be able to present their own material and be able to get a high quality video. And the fact that I could just do it in a Zoom room and just immediately pushed it to 2 HyperDecks, recorded them. We have it all, we have those ISOs all set up. It worked, seamlessly. We went from one presenter, it was like 13 presenters switching, to different places over 6 hours. And all that stuff is now we have a cut of that as well, but we have a cut version of everything but the present, and then we have that, and it's great. John, I know we've kind of digressed, but go ahead, John, and then Guy.
But just the Zoom room with 3 screens, and each of them can have 49 presenters, and you could pin people on each of them. That's new, and we use that
25.
for an event. 25?
25 in a Zoom room, unless it's changed in the last little bit. The Zoom room will only do 25.
3 screens with 49 is, oops.
So
go ahead, Guy.
I was just going to say a shift screen for Bill's dilemma. Shift screen is an app on iOS that allows you to play YouTube full screen. So I take my audio via HDMI into the ATEM and then either do audio follows video so that when I cut to that, it sucks in the audio as well, or I manually just have to remember. You get a lot of things going on at once, though, if you're a single operator trying to run the audio, plus do the switching, plus pull up the YouTube. But generally for church, I've put those YouTubes either. I was doing them in the YouTube app. The nice thing is that in the YouTube app, if you have premium, you could download the entire thing. So in case there's some kind of glitch, you have it downloaded. But then I switched to shift screen because somebody here in the chat recommended it, and that made it so there's no black bars on the side. So you want to look at that app, shift screen.
I'll take a look at it. I like uncomplicated because even just doing a share screen to get the content in, I just didn't want to mess with trying to change modes while I'm in the midst of presentation. I just like, it's a button for this and a button for that. I can think through that while I'm talking.
So to Tony's question, the other option would be what ships with your iMac or your device is iMovie. Is that still not a
It's fine.
beginning for
get,
teachers?
You can definitely get started. I was going to learn how to do something. I mean, if all you have is iMovie, just use iMovie. It does a lot of good stuff. If you are going to spend time actually, like I'm going to get good at something and I'm going to produce great videos, you'll grow out of iMovie pretty quickly. Now, Final Cut will jump right in, but if I was going to spend the time on it, I'd rather just learn I'd just rather just jump to Final Cut if I can afford it.
There's the question. Yeah, and it's a pretty low barrier to entry at $200 to $300 for.
I think it's $300 for everything for educators. So I think it's like Logic and Final Cut and Motion and Compressor. I think
it's only 200.
200, $199.
$199, and it's all of the apps for education. So
Tony, do that.
Yeah,
Tony,
yeah,
that's the answer.
And you have all kinds of tools. We're gonna move on because we're gonna go into speed round. We're gonna go a little heavy on purpose. Well, not on purpose, but we ran a little heavy on these answers. So speed round. Go ahead, Bill.
Justin Emmanuel from Staten Island. Recommended iPad, iPhone apps to run an ATEM from.
Go ahead, John Nidelson.
Just want to do a correction. If you check the Zoom update 5.3.0, supports 49 video participants and gallery view. Each Zoom screen in the Zoom
I got it here. You're exactly right. I got it right here.
Yep. Excellent.
Okay.
All right. Next.
It was Monday.
Yeah. So as of yesterday,
you snooze, you lose.
Yeah. Exactly. Guy, were you going to say what was the iPad app that you're using to cut with the ATEM?
One of them is Strata, and the other one is Touch Director. Strata is more basic, but it does have the ability to run some macros. And then Touch Director, I like for the ATEM Mini Pro if you're going to be doing streaming, because it'll do the streaming keys really quick. So it depends on what you want to do with it, but one for each, and they're kind of pricey apps, so you want to pick which one you want that's got the features that you want.
Jason, real quick.
I would add Strata Macros as its own application, and it is fantastically powerful.
Next question.
Tony Mobley from Newman, Jersey says, I'm very happy with Filmic Pro for use with my iPhone as a webcam, but I've heard some of the panelists mention the $30 version of Camo. Why should I look at it?
Well, I believe Camo is more of a direct to Zoom, right? As opposed to I don't know what you're pointing to, Sky. You got to remember, Sky, that your grid is different than my grid. So when you point down, it doesn't mean anything to me.
Well, it's also a hand signal that guy had his hand up.
I didn't see Guy's hand.
That's why I was pointing, but
yeah, it doesn't help because it's nowhere nearby.
Okay,
go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I'm up here, Sky. I'm not down there.
Yeah,
it's
go ahead,
different
Guy.
for everybody. So the Camo app is just direct straight in, and then the Filmic Pro app, depending on what's compressing the HDMI in, will most likely give you a better picture. So through the ATEM Mini, what you're doing, Tony, is perfect. I mean, I wouldn't go for I wouldn't spend the money, especially if you want to do switching, because you're already doing it with Filmic Pro via the HDMI clean way. So I would stick to what you're doing. You don't need the Camo app. Camo app is for like simple teachers that just want to jam it in. It pops up as a webcam, and they're not doing a bunch of switching and whatnot. So that's the difference.
Yep. Next question.
Tony, I'm sorry, Paul Wallace from here in the panel in Austin, Texas. Is there any interest in doing a second hour on Disguise.com's extended reality for real and virtual events? And he's got a link.
Maybe. Sorry, I'm not that. The real and virtual events. It's not been.
We're not big fans of hybrid events.
We might. It just depends. We've got a long stack of things to talk about in second hours, and so I don't know if that'd be my first pick to it. But we'll see. I'm not against it. If it got suggested and enough people vote on it in the second hour suggestions in Discord, I could be persuaded. Next question.
Terrence Holmes of Oakland, California said, is there a way to clean dust just inside the vent of an iMac? I'm sure my system has mountains of it.
Go ahead, Jason.
An air compressor will do it, and I'm not talking about a can of air. I mean actually like an air compressor that you would get for like an airbrush. A gallon tank is about $30, and you need at least 60 PSI.
I'd be tempted to look for some of the small vacuums too. You can get computer electronic vacuums that will pull it back out. That way you're not pushing it back into your...
The little Dysons work beautifully.
Yeah, but
like
you
the Dustbuster Dyson.
You don't want to push it into the computer. You want to pull it out of the computer, in my opinion. Go ahead, Stuart.
Jason, I just got a question. The pressure, you're talking about 60 PSI. Wouldn't that blow dust through under components? And if people are looking for a vacuum attachment, you can actually get one that runs off a compressor that will actually use the airflow to suck through dust.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
I actually use both. I turn a vacuum on and leave it around, then I use the compressor to knock dust around and off of things, which then exhausts through the vacuum. So it's a simple little system.
Next question.
Stuart Fairweather from Melbourne, and here in the panel says, has anyone found a decent set of NDI scopes?
Not so far. Still working on that one.
So should I put us to grid view and just see everybody and just, yep, there's no reaction. Wow. Yep. I did find one set that I'm just about to try, but they wouldn't actually display the scopes. It would only just display false color. So no good so far.
I'd say that's a prerequisite to being a candidate, would be actually displaying something.
Next question.
Vincent Alvarez of Bellingham, Washington says, doing a conference in Zoom over 4 days, morning session and a couple of afternoon sessions with breaks in between. Does Zoom allow webinars to be recurring by date or number of times? I was asked to confirm this is our best method to generate one webinar for 4 days of content.
I can tell you that you can do it at least 200 times in a row. This is the
What's
same
your source
webinar
for that, Alex?
yeah, exactly. I've been testing this. I've been testing this feature over the last 200 and some days. This is the same webinar that has been started. Not only is it set up that way, but I periodically update it because I keep on thinking I'm going to do something else and I never do. So you get to the last one, you'll get a thing from me. You'll get 2 emails about once a month that say, "Hey, we're extending another month," and so you can keep on adding to it as well as do it. In fact, you can even, if it's not a regular time, you can turn off the regular time, but it causes a little bit of havoc. So it's best to keep it the same, starting at the same time, at least listed at the same time. The thing it'll do is it'll invalidate that if you let it go, I think, an hour past the close time of one, it'll turn it off. But otherwise, you can just have it be the same time. Like a lot of times we've done ones where it's, if you don't care about people knowing, if people know what the time is and you put it in the information, you can have it be some certain time. You'll just start the webinar when you start it. Because for instance, we start it an hour before the actual time on the webinar. So So anyway, yeah, you can absolutely do that. Next question.
238 days.
Yeah, there you go. 238 times. We can do it at least that many times. We'll test it. We'll tell you about 239 tomorrow. All right, next question.
Ernest Floyd in Bastrop, which I think is in Texas, says, I'm setting up a church that has a 16-channel analog mixer. It's got a free RCA tape-out connection. What do you recommend to get the audio into the computer? I've got about $200 to $400 to spend.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Just a little USB audio interface, a Scarlett 2i2 or a Motu M2. You just want to be very careful that you keep your unbalanced lines short. You're going to need an RCA to 1/4 inch TS unbalanced cable.
Go ahead, Paul, real quick.
Yeah, if you're in Bastrop, Texas, look me up. I'm in Cedar Creek, Texas, in Bastrop County. If you're in Bastrop, Louisiana, it's a different place.
Next question.
Brody Hafner of New York City, and there's only one of those, said, Mike, that's the Mike question. I'm sorry. Now we're getting into Mike questions. I didn't notice we were changing. So is there any general...
Is there any more general questions?
Yeah, it looks like Paul Wallace has one. Any suggestions for an iPhone, Android, PC, Mac podcast aggregator app that supports video and audio podcasts? Are there any dedicated podcast players you like? And he notes he uses Cashbox on PC, Mac, Android, and iOS, but he's open to something better. He loves Cashbox search.
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
I use Overcast, and I believe it has a web component. I have no idea if it plays on everything.
Yeah, I think almost everybody I know uses Overcast. So for podcasting, but I don't know if it supports video either. I just listen to it. Next question. Any more stragglers here?
Yeah, we got a couple in here. Dale Nabeta of Oakland says, I teach an AV class at a local college, and one of my students asked if there was a similar organization to ASCAP BMI for video artists. I did not know the answer to any of you.
Not that I know of. Go ahead, Jason.
In practicum, YouTube.
Yeah, but I don't know of any same, because it's it's a different world of where it came out of, I think. But yeah, I don't know of any. It's a good question, but I don't have a good answer. Next question.
That was Paul Wallace, so we're moving on. There's Dale. And then, so Chris Fenwick, Paul Wallace says, when you blow out the candles, what will you wish for?
I don't know where that's from.
I don't think that's appropriate.
All right, next question.
It's his birthday.
Is this your birthday, Chris?
Yes.
Oh, it is Chris's birthday.
There you go.
This is why I skipped my birthday. Exactly what Alex, that look.
Okay.
Very smart.
Don't I get to be inappropriate on your birthday, Chris?
So the question is that we don't know. We don't have any. I didn't have a visual up so that I could we could cue everybody. So it's going to be horrible. It's going to be a horrible experience, but we're going to have to do it anyway. Is everyone ready? Is everyone ready?
You don't have to do it.
Yeah, we can. We can. Yeah, we do have to do it. We have to do it. All right. Ready?
You keep the meter with your hand. You keep the meter.
Okay. All right.
I'd just like to ask the panel one question before we go, Alex.
Okay.
Don't.
No.
Just one question. Does we want to
it.
mute everybody at the same time because I have that power?
No, just pull your ear out and we'll do it. Jeff, can you be our conductor? I don't know how to do that. I'll just go like this, okay? I'll just keep the beat, okay?
It's just
ready?
1, 2, 3.
Okay, ready?
In three.
1, 2, 3. Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday. Happy birthday to you.
Fenwick.
It had to be done. It had to be
may
done.
actually be worse than my original one.
All right.
No amount of auto-tune will ever fix that.
Exactly.
I like that you worried about tempo, but you didn't care about pitch. There was no
right.
just
way
pick your own
to,
pitch.
yeah, like we're just
independent.
You got to pick one thing.
Nobody
at a
has a
time.
pitch pipe here.
No. Next time.
Nobody
next time.
has pipes here.
Next,
Trent has one.
Next, last question. I think there was one more question there, and then we'll jump to Mike's.
Yeah, Michael J. in New York City says, "Hi, Alex. Looks like you're in a new location. What's your mobile ring and method of streaming to YouTube?"
So, because I'm doing a bunch of testing, I have a pretty good setup. So I'm doing some LUT tests. So I had a Ursa sitting around. So I got a mini Ursa with a lens here, and then I've got my mix pre and my I am on Wi-Fi because I'm at the hotel, but it's a pretty beefy setup for it. And I have
Alex's $15,000 portable mix rig.
Yeah, Nanlite 68 is what I'm getting with the light. I almost brought a 40 and I was like, oh, I don't need it, but now I have this hard edge, so I'll maybe get another one. So anyway, but yeah, no, it's because I'm doing tests with the camera specifically, so I had it here, so I figured why not turn it on. So anyway, I wouldn't have normally. I had a Brio, and then I was like, I got the camera here. So anyway, that's what I'm using. And then DPA, I guess, and so. I have one question for everyone here. We're looking at, we still have this kind of, people are interested in having bands jam together online. Has anyone tried doing this? It seems like it's promoted as a feature of JamKazam, Jamulus, and Arts Mesh. Has anyone actually tried to tie these things together, Greg?
Yeah, I have friends in Chicago that have tried, and the JamKazam, I mean, if you're they say that it kind of works if you're closely located. In other words, if you're all in the same city or you live a few miles from each other. Yeah, I know Victor's saying, but and I agree. I don't think anybody has successfully pulled off anything in sync.
Let me know if anyone's interested on Saturday after the Saturday morning session, if we want to just try it, just so we have a recording of like, this is what it looks like when we try it. If people are interested, let me know. Just think about it. Jeff?
Yeah, we've been experimenting with Jamulus and Mellamax cloud servers for some chamber groups, and it's okay. It's not great. There are some groups that are doing cloud recording through Jamulus, but they're doing music that's purposely written for kind of improvisational and not rhythmically together, music that's written for latency. The next thing that's coming is people are making, Jack Tripp has a Raspberry Pi device, and Aloha by Elk, which is I'm trying to get in the beta for, have devices that are audio interfaces that plug directly into your Ethernet, so it kind of skips the latency of your computer. And they're trying to reduce it there. So they're talking, they advertise 1 millisecond latency between your mic and your Ethernet port, but then you still have the internet latency.
Yeah, which is variable. Courtney?
I was wondering, came up with a crazy idea just now, popped into my head. If you could make a device or a piece of software that would generate, since you can transmit in stereo, your microphone on one channel and a synchronization signal that could be based on GPS or internet time clock of some sort. And then the receiving piece of software could then synchronize the various inputs to that GPS signal.
You've just given up the patent.
Yeah, could you do it with
that every day?
It's a good idea.
Time code track might do it.
I just put something in the chat where
there's a click track if you get close enough. A click track with a different frequency for a downbeat. Beep boop 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 beep boop boop. Just to keep.
The problem is it would have to delay all the audio to sync it. So you still wouldn't be able to listen to your own, but what you could do is have all of them go into something that delayed them all for the final output. So so it would, because you couldn't listen to it as
for everybody else without having to do, local records and then sync.
Now you could definitely do that if you in post, but yeah, you could use that as the second channel or whatever to use it as a sync. But yeah, it's an interesting way to do it. Go ahead, Jeff.
Back in 2006, we actually did this. University of Florida, some people there wrote some software that pinged remote sites, calculated the round-trip latency time, and it sent a different advanced click track to each site. And so that the audio being received at University of Florida and audio and video all arrived together over I2.
Did it work?
Yes. Now, none of the remote locations could listen to any of the other people. You were playing
that's been always the case.
scored music with a click.
as illustrated by our horrible birthday thing. It's very hard to, like, you can't, the far end can't hear it because of physics. You know, that you have to slow everything down to sync it, and then you can't play it. Go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, I've talked about it before. I did a string quartet where I had two of the quartet in a different location, and then I had another two in another location, and I just did it as a train. So they heard the second team, or team B of the quartet, heard the first part, and they just added to it live. But of course, the original team A didn't hear that, so they were just adding to it. And so then you just have a train that keeps going, and they add to it, and then you end up with the performance at the end. And it worked perfectly. Like, it sounded great. But it just means that they can't actually hear each other, and they're kind of playing along with it. And so if you design the band in the right way and kind of have the rhythm section, and then you add on top of that and add vocals at the end and things like that, you can do it.
That's an interesting approach. I can see how that would work. Bill?
I just wanted to note on happy birthday singing, I come from a family, my wife's Polish, and there is a Polish traditional song that she sings that extends happy birthday, it's a couple stanzas, into like 7 stanzas. And I have learned...
We sing it in Dutch, same thing.
I've learned that in family gatherings, if I don't start with a really quick tempo, happy birthday can take 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes. So I always try to push the tempo. Let's get through this. We got a lot of song to come.
Good. Peter, and then we're going to move on to Mike. So we've stretched out a little bit.
Yeah, sure. Was that test you were talking about in 2006, was that TCP or UDP?
I would have to go back and look at my notes.
It would have to be UDP. Nothing else is fast enough.
Okay, all right. So now we're going to move to microphones, and we're basically starting now. And I will admit that because I'm in production this week, I will be leaving and let Bill kind of keep running with this at about 8:25. So each day for the next 3 days, while I have a call time at 9, so that I have to make. But what I wanted to do was start a conversation where we start moving from. We might move through the pipeline. So we talk about different parts of the pipeline. So microphone being the first one we're going to choose on this one. We'll talk about preamps. We'll talk about mixers. We'll talk about different, buses and so on and so forth to talk through those things. And so the first one here is to talk about microphones and how we pick up audio. So I wanted to kind of start that conversation. Does anyone want to talk about the main styles of mics that you can use here? Of course, a lot of us are familiar with it. Go ahead, Greg.
I'll start out just simply by saying that mics are classified by 2 things, type and pattern. The type is the electrical working principle of the microphone, whether it's a dynamic condenser or an electric condenser. And the pattern is the way in which the mic picks up the sound. So you can think of mic patterns as lenses in a certain way. Thank you, Jeff.
Jeff has an illustration.
Jeff's got the PowerPoint ready. So the first is the dynamic mic. Oh, somebody just pinned the meter on me here. Okay. The dynamic mic is basically the same as a speaker in reverse. Sound pressure comes in, hits the diaphragm, moves a coil within a magnetic field, and produces a charge. Okay, as opposed to a speaker is the opposite. A charge comes in, moves the coil, which is attached to the cone, then it moves the cone, which creates air pressure. So that's basically how an intercom would work, just by flipping a couple of wires. The other types of the condenser and the electric condenser are based on. Oh, you want me to go to ribbon?
See, we got illustrations here. Ribbon.
Hey, why do I keep defaulting to the meter? Somebody keeps pinning the meter.
You've got the meter pinned, and so when it's going to spotlight, it's changing to active speaker, and you've got it pinned.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Let's go to the ribbon. The ribbon mic is can be either, in the old days was mostly always a dynamic mic, There was no power attached to it. In modern times, they have you can power the ribbon, and it actually ends up powering a little preamp that's in the inside the mic body. Most of the new Royers are like that, but it's a little piece of corrugated. You want to jump in, Jeff?
I was just going to say that in the dynamic moving coil mic, we have a diaphragm that is not conductive, and we attach wire to it, a coil. In the ribbon, the diaphragm is conductive, so it is the conductor moving in the magnetic field. We need a conductor moving in a magnetic field to get electricity. In the dynamic moving coil, we attach a wire to the diaphragm. In a ribbon, the diaphragm is the conductor. That's kind of the difference.
Yeah.
And the key there is mass, and we'll get to talking about that.
Right. Ribbons have been in the past quite popular for dialogue, and in the past and the present, they're the primary, what I would call the primary mic for all brass, trumpets, trombones, anything like that. Ribbons handle a lot of pressure. So then we go to the condenser mic, which operates on a totally different principle, which measures the distance between a diaphragm and a backplate, both of which are charged, and it measures the change in capacitance, basically, between the diaphragm and the backplate. Okay, and that's what produces the charge. Now, these diaphragms are much, much, much thinner than the dynamic ones, and they're, magnitudes of order of increase in sensitivity. So condenser mics can, they can hear better. They're much more detailed. As you know, that the dynamic mics have this proximity effect. If you hold it close to your mic, you get a very full, or close to your mouth, you get a very full range sound. As you back off, both the high end and the low end tend to start going away. We've all seen people at podiums where the guy is too tall and the mic is down here, and you can barely hear him. So that's one of the things about dynamics is typically they don't have a lot of reach. And I don't know where actually the condensers came from, but I know that this was an issue in terms of motion pictures, because at the beginning everything was either a dynamic or a ribbon, and the mics had to be very close to the actors. And as we started to get to wider and wider shots, they needed to find a way to get more reach. So the condenser was a way to do that.
And I think there's a great example of that if you watch Singing in the Rain. There's a great of them trying to get the mic close to the actress. It's like it's in the flower. And there's a whole fun little behind the scenes. And for them, that was only 10 years before when they made the film. It was only it was a change in that short period of time.
Right. So the condensers had much more reach. They could design a bunch of different mics that would operate from a further distance away. The electret condenser takes basically the condenser principle, but what it does is it uses an electret material which is permanently charged, and most people do it on the membrane itself, but some people attach that electret material to the inside of the thing near the backplate, and when that permanently charged material interacts with the backplate, it takes the load off of the power necessities of that mic. Okay, so you can operate it with a battery. Anytime you see a battery in a microphone, that's an electric condenser. Like the mics in your phones are electric condensers. Almost all lav mics are electric condensers. In your computer, and they're very, very, very cheap. So then those are the three types. And then there's the patterns. Patterns are omnidirectional. It hears in all directions simultaneously in a sphere. Yeah, that's a great diagram right there. So for instance, most lavaliers are omnidirectional. So when you turn your head from side to side, you never go off axis. If you have a directional lavalier, as soon as you turn your head, you're off axis and you're going to lose some of that dialogue. Okay, so omnis are really great for lavs. They're really great for handheld interview mics. And they're really good for the typical mics that you have in your phone and the computer and all that stuff. Then we have the next category is the unidirectional microphones. In other words, hearing in only one direction. The first of which is the cardioid pattern. Cardioid comes from, it looks like it, you can see it looks kind of like a heart shape upside down. So that's where the name kind of comes from. But this pattern accepts sound very well from the front, but from the back, it totally rejects. Okay, so this is why when you look at the stage and you see all these singers with their mics up there and you see all the wedges down below and the wedges are blasting, why doesn't it feed back? Because the back of that mic rejects sound. So the back of the mic is pointed at the wedge. So in a cardioid, for instance, in any of the unidirectional mics, you can use it not only to pick up the sound that you want, but you can also use it to reject the sound that you don't want. So for instance, if you have an air conditioning vent or something in your house and you're trying to record something, if you can arrange the mic so that the back of the pattern is towards the air conditioning vent, chances are, if you have a decent speaking voice, you won't hear it. And then from there we go to various phases of not widening, but what's the opposite of widening?
Focusing.
Thank you, Bill. So then we have the supercardioid, which is a little narrower pattern than the cardioid, but it has a bit more reach than the cardioid does. And it has this little lobe around the back. I kind of put super and hyper in the same category to me, but it has this
same
little
thing,
lobe.
Greg. That's why I threw them both there.
Yeah, good, thanks. It has this little lobe in the back that sometimes can pick up something. It's not as totally as rejective as the cardioid, but it has more reach. So the supercardioid or the hypercardioid are the go-to mics for interior dialogue, for instance, in a film. They're good for isolating instruments when you're trying to tight mic something so that you don't get stuff. The cello over there, you don't want that. We just want the viola. And then do you have a shotgun or a low bar?
I'm looking for a shotgun.
Okay. The shotgun is the ultimate, kind of extension of this principle, where it's super focused and very, very, there you go, and very, very narrow in pattern, but it's got tremendous reach. And this is the premier mic for exterior dialogue, anything where you're really, really trying to zero in on stuff. You do have to kind of watch out for this little lobe in the back, but it's got tremendous rejection from a lot of angles. And so it's quite useful. The only thing about this is the rejection that it has is at the mid-low to higher frequencies. The low frequencies, it doesn't have a lot of low frequency protection. So you could in fact get a lot of low end bleed around the back. But for pinpoint accuracy, it's the best. Now the other caution is that that pattern is partially accomplished by what we call a
interference tube.
Thank you very much. The interference tube. That's so great to have a panel of experts. If you've noticed on almost any shotgun that you've seen, there's a lot of little slits, almost like air vents, all the way up and down the line. I got it, Jeff. Okay. And what happens is when this pattern through the case creates this super tight pattern. The only problem is if you use a shotgun in a very tight walled interior, it can actually create more reverb than is in the room. It's one of those strange little oddities about shotguns, which is why, primarily hypers and hypercardioids, and sometimes, a lot of times, cardioids are used indoors and not shotguns, unless it's a big, wide open space. So that's the quick rundown.
Do you want to dive in? Well, he has a bidirectional figure 8 up there, which is
Bill,
you
go for that one.
Well, it's basically, you can see it. It's got tube lobes front and back. Bidirectional microphones can be sometimes really good to put between two people you're interviewing and things like that. These all have places. The couple of little points after listening to all that I like to make. We said sensitivity. We talked about sensitivity of mics, and sensitivity is a bit of a double-edged sword in my experience. You'd think to yourself, well, why don't I just get the most sensitive, tightest pattern mic, and I don't have to worry about all the outside sound around there. It's not really how it works. Sometimes you want sensitivity because you want to get an environment along with the person talking, and sometimes that's not what you want. If you're recording with a camera in a noisy kitchen, too much sensitivity means that there's going to be a lot of clatter and rattle that's interrupting people being able to hear the person speaking. So you really want to get a less sensitive, maybe dynamic mic that's very close to them to reduce all the outside sound and focus on what people are saying. And the other thing has to do with when you see these patterns on paper, in the real world, your space has reflections, and whatever you're saying, even if it's a tight pattern, is going to be bouncing off of surfaces and coming in from the sides that do not reject as much. So there is shotgun mics quote, I think, is one of the worst terms, because they never work like a real shotgun where all the pellets go in one direction and nowhere else. Nothing is that directional, maybe other than something the CIA has. Go ahead, Jason. Let's dive into some of it.
Did we miss area mics? Did I just space out on that, or
boundary mics and area mics? Who wants to deal with those? Courtney, do you want to take a run at those?
Sure, I can touch on PZMs or pressure zone microphones, which are designed to eliminate echo or multipaths of audio entering the microphone. And the way they do that is to put the element facing down close to a reflective surface, very close. And it creates a pressure zone so that the reflective surfaces near the microphone then are coincident with the sound that's reaching the microphone, so that you hear less echo, and so it can give you a fairly clear, relatively, I don't like them at all, but a relatively echo-free recording in a situation where an open microphone further away from someone would not be able to deliver that.
Would that be like a conference mic, one of those Polycom things?
Yes, a lot of those are pressure zone microphones. Also, they use them a lot in stage and theater.
Yeah, stages when it's at the bottom of the stage is the most common, I'd say.
By the way, I just realized we went past giving Greg a round of applause for doing the entire world of microphones in the space of 3 minutes. Bravo, Greg!
And Jeff Francis for hitting the beep every time. And remember that slide change beep.
Absolutely. Okay.
I want to cover one other type that wasn't touched on besides the electret condenser, the regular capacitive condenser microphone, and the dynamic, is Sennheiser's line of RF condensers, which use a little different principle for achieving their output voltage. It actually has a capacitive element in it, like a regular condenser microphone, but it uses that variable capacitance to modulate an RF signal, which is above, a high frequency RF signal, and then that signal is demodulated like an FM channel within the microphone, and that generates your audio coming out. And so the RF condensers, the MKH series from Sennheiser, are much more immune to moisture, which is a problem with most condenser microphones, because they don't have that issue with the moisture changing the capacitance of the microphone, because the RF, modulating the RF signal, eliminates that variance and
And I think one of the things you're hearing is this is why there are thousands of different kinds of microphones. There is not, when somebody says, what's the best mic I should buy, it's always for what task, in what environment, for the result that you want, because they have so many, because you start adding up these patterns with sensitivities, with the type of connection to the outside world, and whether or not it needs phantom power, whether you're going to be recording outdoors or indoors. This is, microphones, to me, I always think of them like spices. You can have 400 spices in a spice rack, and you're going to pick the combination that works with your main ingredient to make the best tasting dish you can. Jeff Francis, then Sky, and then we'll go into the questions. We got a bunch of them here.
As Greg was saying, we categorize mics by polar pattern, and we categorize them by transducer, which is dynamic moving coil, ribbon, or condenser, and these various forms of condenser. When we talk about what car they drive, we talk about you might drive a blue Toyota or a red Ford. Those are two independent categories, and the same thing with microphones. The actual transducer type, whether it's a ribbon, a moving coil, dynamic, or a condenser, that's one category. And then the polar pattern is another one. So you can have an omnidirectional condenser, and you can have a hypercardioid dynamic, but you could also have a hypercardioid condenser. So they're independent categories. The polar patterns that you see on the paper are very different. They're the perfect theoretical polar pattern, and the real world is very different from that. There are two types of microphones that come close, and that is a pure pressure omnidirectional. So this is an omnidirectional that's, sort of a recording pencil condenser, high end. You see it for measurement microphones. And then there is the pure pressure gradient, which is a bidirectional. So one of those is open the diaphragm to sound on one side and it's closed on the back. The other one is open on both sides. To do anything else, to do cardioids, hypercardioids, supercardioids, you have to open the back of the microphone partially with sound ports. And this messes up the polar pattern and the frequency response. It's what makes all microphones sound different and makes it the black art. I'm going to jump into one other topic here, because we've talked about polar patterns, and that's a thing called distance factor. This talks about how much the room rejects, and we're talking about direct sound versus indirect sound. That could be my mic versus the sound of my room. That could be my pickup of an instrument versus the reverb of a hall. That could be the pickup of a microphone versus how well it rejects feedback. That's direct sound, what you point the mic at, and indirect sound coming from all other directions. It's most important to think about generally how well mics reject sound, because there's so many reflections from other surfaces. Omnidirectionals don't reject sound. They pick up sound from all directions. As you move into more directional microphones, the next kind of stage is cardioids and bidirectionals, and they reject sound about 4 dB better, so you can put them 1.7 times farther away. You get to a hypercardia, you can put it twice as far away as an omni and get the same blend of reverb or the same amount of feedback rejection. Shotguns move out farther than that. They have distance factors in the 3 or 4 times.
Cool. That's a good thing. We've got Jason, Sky, John, and Stuart on my list. Let's go in that order. Jason's, take it away.
Actually, that was just a beautiful cover of it. I wanted to show, so the Sennheiser modulators really do work very well. Yes, they're expensive, and yes, they are absolutely fantastic. I've got to jump out of here. I've got a meeting, but man, I love you guys. This is like the nerdiest, like my people. I love it.
It's fun. All right, Sky, let's move to you. Bye, Jason. Have a good day.
Embrace your enthusiasm. I will keep the fire burning, Jason. No, I'm kind of overwhelmed the amount of knowledge, but how succinct it was, Jeffrey, that you could pull that out and teach us, and I didn't have to, attend a dorm room meeting. Anyway, the question I was going to ask was, when we're making a film, I was very happy that we had a lav or that we could hide something, but then the director says, no, we want a shotgun because we want the ambiance of the room. And I'm thinking as an editor, yeah, but now I've got to try to filter the stuff I don't want out. You can always add room noise back in. So I'd love, Greg's, your opinion on the two mics on a film set which would you generally choose? Or is it just dependent upon moving the story forward? How much? And that's my question.
Answer, Greg?
I would use a lav only if I didn't have any other option. Typically the sound of lavs is not very open. It's typically closed. DPAs are about the best lavs you can buy. They're extremely expensive, and they sound pretty good if they're well placed and they're used with a lot of care and a lot of the hiding implements that you have, the accessories that you have to go through. I mean, it's a real ordeal, Sky. It's not, you can't just go up and stick a mic under somebody's shirt and expect it to sound good. You've got the chest cavity to deal with. That alters the sound a lot. It's if you take a lav and you put it out and you hold it out like this, it's going to sound pretty good, and you're going to think to yourself, "Wow, that sounds pretty good." You put it on their chest, you got a whole different deal. You start going up on the collar, and one of the worst things is these, when you have to put a lav on the collar of a T-shirt up here. I mean, so the thing is that it's very convenient, and sometimes it's the only option. If you got two steady cams working and nothing else, that's a good reason to use lavs, so that you're not in the way. It's a practical consideration, not a sound consideration.
And so
right.
why was one recommendation they pointed it down? The lavs are pointing down? Why would they do that?
Well, if you have an Omni, it doesn't matter. If you have a directional lav and you're pointing it down, you just don't know anything about sound.
And you might have a nasal snorter. We've got occasionally those people who like to breathe out of their nose, and so turning the mic element upside down will suppress that. John Idelson was next, and then Stuart after that.
What was you saying? In my old days, my sound instructor basically said there's a mic designed for specifically everything, and there's some really strange mics like the Cole's lip microphone. Which you actually have to have on your lip. And we didn't talk about parabolic microphones and what's used with sports. But my mentor, who said there's always a right microphone, always grabbed a 635A Electro Voice. So that should say something.
Stuart is going to talk about the parabolic because he's holding one.
Yeah, well, actually, I saw what the chat was asking. And yes, that is a parabolic mic. And we discussed the sound characteristics of that the other day. They don't have the frequency range of any mic that's put on them. You'll lose frequency because of it. The other one that was mentioned in the chat was a laser microphone, and just so everybody knows how they work, they are related to distance measuring equipment that uses a laser to go out, hit an object and come back. And the device is actually measuring the change in distance and inferring the waveform from that. And yes, they are frequency limited.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's get through. We got like a ton of questions here. We've got at least, I think, 11. Brody Hafner, New York City, starts off with, what are the relative merits of headphone combined with mic versus separate mic and headphone with both over-the-ear and in-ear headphones? So the first thing is just convenience. If you're talking, and mostly you see those combo systems with earphones and mics that are permanent for things like comm system, where you always want to be able to talk and hear, because they're a one-trick pony for doing that. I would say that a separated system gives you more options. I'm here on, it's this side. I have an actual lavalier that is not on a head thing, and I have a headset rig, and so that means I can take this same Countryman B3 and use it as a lav on a set to mic someone by taking it off the headset rig. If you're a permanent mount, you can't have that flexibility. So that's just one of the possibilities for why you go one direction or the other. Anybody else want to? And over-the-ear versus in-ear. In-ears tend to be a little less stable. Over-the-ear gives you more stability. It's going to stay on when you're moving your head, particularly if you're doing something active. So if you've got aerobics or something like that, you want a lot of stability and the mic being in its place and staying there. Courtney, go ahead and dive in.
Well, I think it would also depend on whether you're going to be on camera or not, and whether you want to conceal the earpiece. Like, my in-ear earpiece is pretty much hidden. So you don't want to wear a pair of cans, etc.
Yeah, particularly you're doing period piece and you're supposed to be in the 18th century. A big honking lavalier is probably not a good idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
Stuart?
Yeah, you just keep them separate if you want to monitor differently than, and be on camera.
Stuart, go ahead.
Yep. With microphones that have got headphones built into them and what have you, and the ones for your phones and the like, just realize that all of these are budget limited by the manufacturer. They will choose the cheapest components they can get that do the job. So if you can avoid using this microphone as much as possible, you will sound better.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense because they're headphones mostly, microphones secondarily. All right, let's move on to TJ Asher says, Mike, been watching a lot of orchestral performances lately, and thanks to Jeff Francis, I can now see the tiny microphones used to record the performances. How are these tiny lipstick-sized microphones able to capture a full range of sound produced by an orchestra? Jeff, this is in your bailiwick, and then Greg.
I'm sorry, TJ, for pointing those out because now you will never unsee them. But the size of a microphone has nothing to do with how well it will pick up sound. About the only thing that size, it's actually larger diaphragms are worse off axis because as you get to beyond the size of high frequencies. So we have a huge range of hearing. We can hear from about 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz, and y'all are welcome to argue about that on the internet later. But when you convert that to moving sound through the air, then you're talking about wavelengths that range from high frequencies, 5/8 of an inch, something like that, down to low frequencies that are over 50 feet long. So when we talk about wavelengths of light, there's a very narrow 1 octave range, but our hearing is a range of like 10 octaves. So when we get diaphragms that are larger than the size of high frequency wavelengths, coming from the front of the diaphragm perpendicular to it, that's fine. But when they come across the diaphragm parallel, you can actually get a peak and a trough of the wave on the diaphragm. And then which way is the diaphragm supposed to go? If part of the sound is pushing it in and part of the sound is pushing it out, so the diaphragm doesn't move, so you get less high frequencies off axis. So larger diaphragms work great on axis. And the advantage of large diaphragms is, and the way I talk about this is like it's a sail that catches more wind. So it needs less amplification, so therefore it has lower noise from the electronics in the condenser mic. So large diaphragm, low noise, but poor high frequencies off axis. Small diaphragm, higher self noise in the microphone, but better, especially if you're talking about an omnidirectional, it gets better omnidirectionals all the way up to high frequencies.
Very nice. And you were coming in a little bit hot, Jeff, just so you know. Greg Curda is next.
Okay, two things, Bill. I just wanted to point out to everybody that Guy has now posted a playlist of videos that he did a long time ago, which shows with a representative from Sennheiser, which shows all the patterns, and it's a demonstration of how all those patterns work and what they actually sound like with both the tone generator and the guy's voice. So feel free to go check those out. No, I was just going to add, Jeff, as always, puts it so eloquently. I was just going to say that a typical stereo scenario for orchestra is, 3 large diaphragms up top in a left, center, right configuration, or possibly only 2 in a left, right configuration. And the small diaphragm mics are spot mics for the individual instruments to get a little bit more of the crispness of those instruments and a little bit more refinement on each instrument so you can feather them in. Okay. But the typical score that you hear, coming out of for a Hollywood picture, anything that was on a scoring stage, the vast majority of that is captured by that three mic tree.
Okay, I looked down the list. We still have 11 questions, so we have to keep the pace up here. We've got a lot of stuff, a lot of people asking about audio. James Babbitt in San Diego has one specifically for Jeff Francis. He mentioned the Fedhead Phantom. How well does this work with condenser microphones?
So the Fedhead and the Cloud Lifter are designed for ribbon mics especially, and dynamic mics that have low output. And so they're just an inline amplifier powered by phantom power, and they will not let phantom power get to your mic. So the Fedhead Phantom does the same thing. It provides, I think, 18 or 20 dB of boost, but it also allows phantom to power the phantom-powered microphone, the condenser mic. It'll work fine. Your worry might be that you would add additional noise or that you would actually provide a signal that is too large for the preamp, and so you would clip the input of your preamp. I would think that most condensers don't need that unless you're recording extremely quiet instruments at a distance.
By the way, you also run into mics that are phantom-powered mics that have that little AA battery in the barrel of the connector. If you're using it with a mixer that has phantom power, the battery is kind of unnecessary because that powers the mic. The battery is there when it doesn't have that to keep the condenser head charged. Moving along, James Babbitt is back again. Higher mic sensitivity can help when the talent moves off mic. What are some ways to help keep the talent directly in front of the mic? Don't say nails. Stuart, go ahead.
Gaffer tape. So keep the talent on the chair.
You know, the more experienced the talent that you're working with, the less that does become a problem, because part of that is just their level of experience. A good talent, particularly a good on-camera spokesperson or a good actor or actress, will be aware of these things and will work to the tools that have been provided for them to do their job well. Let's do Courtney and then Greg. Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, that's the purpose of a boom operator, because they keep the microphone in front of the talent wherever the talent goes. And, the talent, of course, has to hit their marks. And in a live music situation, you just give them a mark on the stage and they know where the microphone is. Even Stevie Wonder knows where that microphone is in front of it.
Greg?
And if you happen to be in an interview situation and the guy is fidgety and moving around, this is where a wider pattern like a cardioid might come in handy if you can get it down close enough to him, and you can deal with all that.
Yeah, I would say it's also set dressing sometimes. I know in interview situations, if I see a swivel chair on set, I immediately scream for something else, because you don't want the talent just turning around all over the place. That can mess up sound, and also just swivel chairs squeak.
I never thought about it, but that's the optical version of depth of field of a lens. You're giving it a broader.
Exactly.
Could be considered that way. Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's keep going.
Gaffer tape will also stop a swivel chair from spinning.
Gaffer tape will do a lot of things, as we know.
I have gaffed a client before.
Ken Jones out of Seattle says, you mentioned the dynamics don't have reach. What is it? I'm sorry, that's cut off on my thing. The reach that condensers do. Let me move this over a little so I can read the whole question. But doesn't the inverse square law apply equally to dynamics and condensers? It applies to everything. It is physics. That's one of the great things about the laws of physics. There is no circumstances that we know of so far that they don't apply to, but there's stuff beyond that, and I'm going to let Courtney address some of it.
I was just going to say it takes a little more energy to move the diaphragm in a dynamic mic because it's got that coil attached to it. So, the moving air has to move the diaphragm, and in a condenser, it's a very light mylar coated with gold, usually element. So that has very little mass to move. So sound vibrations can move the mylar a lot easier than can move that piece of mylar with a coil attached to it. So
yeah, there's also just the issue of the fact that the signal that the mic itself, depending on the technology it uses, is sending out. I mean, there are nominal things, nominal line levels, 1 volt peak to peak, and things perfectly designed will always output the same level. With a microphone, the size of the microphone, the way it's designed, there could be variations in the amount of signal that it's just putting out depending on how the mic is constructed. And with some kinds of condensers, maybe the designer of the circuit that's amplifying it has made it hotter or less hot. There are standards, but they're not always adhered to. So different mics can output different amounts of signal, I guess you could call it informally. And so you never kind of know what you're going to get until you get in, plug them in, and balance everything out. Moving along. James Babbitt is back again with its very small capsule. How does the Countryman E6 mic work? I think it works the same way as we were talking about, the fact that some of these incredibly small diaphragms still work on the same port. And Greg and Jeff talked about it's a diaphragm suspended with a magnet right behind it, and the sound pressure waves are going to hit it regardless, just the same. So the only question, regardless of the size of the diaphragm, is how accurately does it translate that into the voltages that the circuits of the recording thing are able to capture and record the signal. So the size of the mic doesn't necessarily have to do with how quality a signal you get out of it. It has to do with other things. Jeff's going to amplify this and do a better job than I just did.
Yeah, most of those really small mics are electret condensers. So we're just talking about a backplate. That's a piece of metal, and then a very, very thin piece of, like as Courtney said, mylar sputtered with gold, some other conductor that's very light and it's very small. So this is exactly what's, in the end of your phone, a tiny little electret condenser. And they're mass produced, and even at 59 cents a piece or whatever Apple's paying for that, they sound good.
Yeah, sometimes remarkably good. Sometimes, and just the technological parts of manufacturing these in mass have gotten so careful and so high tolerance. You get really good mass-produced stuff sometimes now. TJ Asher of Minneapolis has our next question, and the panel, or I guess he's not here today. He had to take off. I watched some of the behind-the-scenes of The Mandalorians, and when they were inside the volume LED soundstage, the sound in the behind-the-scenes sequences of people talking was very echoey. How do they deal with that when recording dialogue for the actual show? And Courtney has his hands up and been involved in a lot of that. Then Greg next.
There was a very good article written in Sound and Video magazine, the magazine from 695, about the mixer who dealt with shooting in the volume. And they had a huge problem when they first went in there and started to shoot, because the screen is a parabola. And you put a microphone in there, and it picks up sound from all over the room and focuses. It's like the parabolic mic that Stuart was holding up earlier, and it was a huge problem to record sound. And I think she worked with the production mixer, worked with the stage designers to slightly change the angle of that screen, widen it a little bit to eliminate a lot of that focused energy problem. And it is a huge problem with sound and echo, and they have a hard time dealing with that. They put a lot of sound baffles in, but the problem is, since they're using the screen itself to light the actors, a lot of times you can't really bring an overhead baffle in because they're lighting it with the LED screen from above, or they're lighting it from the LED coming from the right or the left. So it's really tough to control echo, and they put sound dampening material everywhere else in the room to eliminate a lot of it.
When I was a grade school kid, we got a chance to do a tour of the Dome of the Capitol in Washington, D.C., and one of the stories they told us was that in the early days after it had been built, one of the party luminaries was in this part of the parabola, and underneath the dome, somebody else from the other party figured out that if they put their desk right over here, they could hear more about what they were saying at the other party's desk, and that was their first form of surveillance, was using the echoes in the Capitol dome to sneak information. Sky?
Yes, I've been a part of those whisper walls at these structures and the castles and things like that. But as you were saying that, it reminded me of the Disney auditorium that Frank Gehry, and apparently the sun reflected off of that titanium, and it bounced across the street and melted the bicycle seat. And so you're talking about sound and or light traveling at angles. It can be pretty powerful.
It's all wave phenomenon, the same thing. Greg?
Yeah, I have 3 letters to answer the question. ADR.
Which is automated dialogue replacement, for those of you who don't.
I mean, so many pictures are almost completely looped. You the audience have no idea, and that means it was a good job. Consider, do you remember Little House on the Prairie?
Thank you, Jeff. So good. Thank you.
You remember Little House on the Prairie, you guys?
Yeah. Lord,
that was shot on the back lot at MGM, right next to the freeway. They got 0 production sound out of it every day.
Oh man, they had to loop the whole.
A lot of it was at the Disney Ranch too, Placerita Canyon.
Yeah,
man, that's amazing. Stuart, real quick before we go on,
Battlestar Galactica is right next to Burbank Airport.
We still got 9 to go through.
There's a simple rule for all production, whether it's lighting, sound, camera, anything. if you get it right, the audience doesn't notice you did it at all.
Yep. Yep. My first rule of shooting on sets doesn't have to be real, just has to look real. Okay, we're going to move on to Paul Wallace's question. I have a friend, Bob Nagy, who made a living out of modifying ham radio mics, even adding something, BBs, to add heft to the mic. Is there anyone or any company that mods broadcast mics like we're talking about today? Note also, does any individual or company repair mics? I have a couple of wiped out Shure SM58s, and while waiting for an answer, I did a search and found this excellent site. Microphone. He's got the link there. Greg, do you know of anybody who does work on old stuff?
I do. In fact, I have a very good friend in Chicago who I would like to get on for a guest spot sometime. And he's done wonders. He does a lot of changes to mics. He gets in there and reguts them and
I would like his name too, because there was a guy in Chicago who would work on the old, like I have a Shure SM5B that I've had for a long time. It was one of my first radio mics, and for a while this guy in Chicago was notorious for being the guy who would refresh those and repair them. He even had things like the foam windscreens that had deteriorated. I don't know if this guy knows him, or maybe he might have a connection, but I'd love to find somebody like that. So
okay, you want me to I'll shoot it to you in Discord.
Thank you. Yeah, I truly
Yeah,
appreciate
Greg,
that.
could you put a link to that, your friend, in the Discord or in the Makana?
Makana.
Yeah.
Okay, we're moving on to Roscoe Jones. Why don't we digitize audio right next to the transducer? Is there circuitry and power enough to do that at the head of the mic? I know there are some mics that are pretty small that seem like they have active electronics inside them, but that's generally not been the approach I've seen out of mic manufacturers too much yet. Anybody else see any different? I guess not. So we don't know, Roscoe. Courtney will take a stab at it. Go ahead.
Well, there are AES microphones that have A to D converters built into the microphone body, and then they just can connect to preamps that are designed to receive digital signals. But since most of the mixers out there are really designed to receive analog signals, that's why we keep the A to D converter in the mixer.
Sky out of Seattle has our next question. Into a mixer, line versus mic. Sorry if this was already answered. So who wants to do the technical part? One signal very, very small, one signal very, very big. Those are two different things. Let's do Stuart, then Greg. Go ahead, Stuart.
Preferably line when it comes to putting audio into cameras, assuming the camera has a line level setting. The simple reason for that is the signal is larger, so you'll have more rejection of noise within the camera's electronics if you need to be recording on the camera. The other thing with line level is it goes further distances without getting as much noise from outside interference.
Yeah, typically every channel in any kind of mixer will have a preamp in it that can take mic level and elevate it to line, but I'm not sure that's always best way. Greg, you want to?
Bill, if I could just add one thing for the cameras, even top-end cameras like the Alexa and what have you, the mic level preamps are rubbish because the camera is designed to be used with a professional sound recordist on set who is recording on something like a sound devices piece of equipment that is designed to do sound. So don't expect the cameras to have good quality audio, even if they are top-level cameras.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. Even big cameras for professional use sometimes have things that are just good enough because they expect a different workflow to be the norm. Greg, did you have a different point?
We're used to we've gotten stuck with the ENG and then the DSLR, so we think that one tool should do everything, and I totally agree.
The preamps and DSLRs work.
I mean, not only does Stuart look really amazing today, he's got the right answers too, and I appreciate that. It's a question of the preamps. Like, a camera is designed to shoot picture. It's not an audio device. So you want to get your cleanest signal out of a mixer and then send that line level to the camera, so it doesn't have to do anything.
Okay, we're going to have to deal with the next one, James Babbitt. It's for Jeff Francis. Jeff has left, and I'll try to try to do a hack's job of this. Please explain what you mean by microphone self-noise. So all microphones are generating a signal, and they also are picking up or self-generating noise. The circuitry of anything that's active is going to be using little amplifier circuits, and there is a signal-to-noise ratio associated with those. So as you turn a microphone with a bad signal-to-noise ratio up, the hiss or the electronic sound comes up with the signal that you're trying to amplify. When microphones are rated for low self-noise, what they mean is the design has been done carefully with premium parts such that there's a very low noise floor compared to the signal coming out of the microphone. So even as you turn it way up, it remains a quiet kind of bass signal on top of which the microphone signal rides. And that is really useful, particularly in post where you might want to take a quiet sound and amplify it. You want really low self-noises also in a lot of self-noise microphones in a lot of circumstances, like if you're in nature and you're trying to get distant bird calls and things like that. It's a very quiet signal. So when you want to crank it up to hear that clearly, you don't want to crank up the noise along with the signal.
Greg, could you mention also about room noise?
Okay. What do you want me to say about it?
What is it? Why is it important?
Oh, room
is
tone
is it a thing?
It is a thing. It is the natural sound of the room that you're in while you're filming, and it's critical because a lot of times when you're cutting dialogue, you cut in between. If you're really cutting dialogue, then you just cut the dialogue, and you have to fill with something. And the idea of room tone is that it's a very quiet piece and very consistent that you can fill in between all the lines.
And as a video editor, if you cut a scene and you say, I need to move the next part of the scene back, you will go from whatever room tone was recorded on the microphone for your live sound to nothing, because now your NLE doesn't have any signal there, and it'll come back, and you might not have heard it in their field recording, but it's really present when you play back that dialogue recording against
I often
video.
refer to it as audio putty.
Yeah. It can cover a plethora of sins in recording to have good room tone available that really works. Shane Foley of Ashland, Oregon says, I've convinced a client to up her Zoom audio game beyond calling in via the iPhone. What's a better, less than $40 option? A USB headset into her laptop or a mic going into her iPhone? Product suggestions, thank you. And Greg wants to take this one. Go ahead, Greg.
I would say the simplest thing to do is grab a Logitech or a Plantronics headset, conference headset mic, and plug it in the USB to the laptop, and you're done.
Yeah, we talk a lot about the inverse square principle, and in terms of signal to noise ratio, the first place is if you can get a mic like these headset mics do, where this is now 1 inch from my mouth, it is naturally going to get you the best mic to room signal to noise ratio out there. That's part one, mic close. Everything else is a dip down from that. Moving on to Mike Burns from Spokane, Washington. Mike asks, my office is a wooden and cement cave. We're sorry about that, Mike. With 12-foot ceilings, I'm not going to treat the office dampening. What handheld mic could give me great quality with great sound rejection? I'm looking at Sennheiser and Shure mics. So something close. Somebody, John, was talking about the Coles lip mic, weren't you? That actually might be a solution there. It is an odd beast. The BBC, I think, developed it back for like motor racing. You literally, the mic has an oval cage, and it's designed to put your top lip inside the oval cage. It is a ribbon microphone. It can sound very good, and that means that you're going to get the maximum amount of rejection of anything, including the fact that the cage is going to stop sounds from getting in. So that's a possibility to look at.
I've never had one. We had some high noise things we were trying to do, and we ended up getting the microphone systems that were used in cockpits of helicopters.
Okay.
But the frequency range was really bad. So I understand that lip mic is wonderful, but I've never had $800 of loose change or a loud enough noise that needed it.
I will tell you, let me tell you a quick story. I once had to shoot a video in a plant, and in the main room where we had to have walking through people interviews, it was so loud that OSHA mandated that you had to have headphones on. I mean, I don't think I've ever been in this loud an environment. The machines were excruciating. And we had to do this dialogue. So what I ended up doing was getting aerobics mics and putting them right next to the person's mouth. Those were the people who were going to be interviewed. And then I told them, I'm going to point at you. And when I point at you, you say your line. And I'm going to point at you and you say your line. Nobody could hear a single thing they were saying to each other because the environment was so loudly. But for me and my headphones, I could pick up what they were saying clearly. You could still hear the room, but we heard the dialogue. So mic placement is number one in these things. Courtney, go ahead.
Yeah, as far as Mike Burns' question, I'd say Heil PR40 has great rejection, but you got to stay right in front of it. It's got to stay within about 3 or 4 inches of your mouth. If that's a problem, then a more directional microphone might work. But there's nothing that can improve something that has full of echo other than treating the room, really.
Yeah, that's going to be the bottom line on it. Okay, we've got one more to get to, and I'm sorry for those of you who were trying to get someplace at 9 o'clock West Coast time or the equivalent. We are running a little bit over. Mike Burns of Spokane back again with I'm not being cute. Show of hands, how many panelists got nuts when they hear our president at the podium nasal whistle or snorting? Those kinds of odd sounds are always an issue. I've worked with talent before, and everything we've got, what's that weird sound? And it's some mouth clicking thing that just happens to them. The one thing I would say is I used to do a thing in my sound demos at like NAB and places like that where you say have everybody close your eyes and say, hi, my name's Bill Davis. I live in Scottsdale, Arizona back then. And then I would say, now open your mouth, and I would go, and you got audio without video and you got video without audio. Which one communicated more information? The soundtrack of everything we do generally carries far more information than the visual. And so getting it right, however you have to do that, is critically important. And that means you must monitor. You must monitor sound. Going out to record video without any kind of headphones or something that you can monitor sound is nuts. And that's when you pick up things like these lip noises and things that don't bother you at the time because you're not thinking about them. But when you go back and listen to the playback, they drive you crazy. Stuart, did I see your hand up there?
What kind of mic does the president use?
I'm sorry. Hang on a second. Let's do Paul and we'll finish.
Go, Paul.
Yeah. What does anyone know what kind of mic the president uses?
Classically, for decades, it was a pair of SM57s on a little dual stand. I don't know if they've upgraded them, but they've used that for like 30 years in presidential speeches, and I think they still use them. I'm sure they keep them in a locked titanium case between presidential addresses, so nobody messes with them. But that for decades, that was the presidential podium mic pair of choice. Greg?
Yeah, the only other thing I was going to say is that if the product is really important, there will be an editor on the back end of that who's going to go through and get rid of all those clicks and pops.
That makes sense. Yeah, get rid of clicks and pops. That's possible. Stuart?
Just a small anecdote. Back in I think it's the 70s or 80s, Her Royal Highness visited Australia and was set up to do a speech on Parliament House, and the audio people had taken the time to set the audio up and make sure it was perfect. The person who came along beforehand was a general who raised the microphone up so he could be heard and never put it back down. And as you can imagine, the Queen, being slightly shorter, looked up at the mic and began her speech, knowing full well what was going on. And audio people got fired for it. So just remember, always have an assistant nearby, because the best sound you can get is sound you've got, not the sound that's off mic.
And your job is to get the thing. I can't imagine being the handler there, and you're going to go out and fix the Queen's. Pardon me, Mum, but I've got to do this because no one will get this.
Bill, if you've seen some of her home videos, you'll know she's actually a pretty good photographer and cinematographer, and would understand completely why the microphone needed to be moved.
Yeah. We had one more come in here at the last moment. EJ Steele in Phoenix says, I'm forced to choose between a Heil PR40 and a Rode NTG3. Which is the best for voiceover work? Ooh, that's going to be a tough call. They're going to sound different. I think the NTG3 is probably going to sound a little crisper and sharper than the PR40 as a dynamic. And what's the nature of the voice you're recording for voiceover? Is it a guy with a low rumbly voice? Is it a woman talent who has a very crisp and sharp delivery? Those things will make some difference. Greg, what are your thoughts?
Well, the kind of the typically VO is usually done with with a large diaphragm something, but there's always been this kind of field version for dialogue for VO where you take a shotgun like the NTG3, you put it at a 45-degree angle, but you got to make sure that the mouth is exactly parallel to the capsule, and but I mean in terms of better, I think you'd have to listen to both and see which one you like generally, but people sound different too. One, I mean, there are people that don't sound good on a U87. Hard to believe, but there are people that don't really sound good on a U87.
Yeah, it is a weird thing. Every human being's voice is different. How it comes out of you is different, and how it can be recorded is different. You mentioned that. I mean, for decades, we only used large diaphragm, first dynamics in radio, and then as condensers got better, we used large diaphragm condensers. But then I think it was Ernie Anderson, who was the late, great talent who used to do the daybook announcing for ABC. And the Love Boat particularly, I mean, he was all over in the, I guess it was the mid-'80s. I can't remember when Love Boat was on. But Ernie Anderson famously used a Sennheiser MKH416. And all of a sudden, all the voiceover people I knew were running out to try to find MKH416s because they wanted to sound like Ernie. That's not going to make you sound like Ernie. Ernie sounds like Ernie. That is doing a recording of a particular voice that has particular characteristics, and it worked beautifully for him. Plus, he was trying to do something that cut through a mix, and I would use a different mic for something that cut through a mix than I would for something that was purely designed to be just that voice giving a speech, and that was all it was supposed to do. Courtney, do you want to amplify on this?
As a choice between those two microphones, it would probably depend on the deadness of your recording environment. PR40 will eliminate, if it's a fairly live environment that you need to attenuate some, the PR40 will help get rid of that. NTG3 will pick up a little more reflectivity of the room. So if you're in a really dead environment, the NTG3 will give you a nice sound. And if you're in a not so dead environment, the PR40 would probably be the better choice.
That sounds like really good advice. John Idelson and then Stuart Fairweather.
Yeah, we were doing podcasts at various locations and classrooms, and the PR40 was great because there was always some noise somewhere. And you see it on Twit TV and stuff, so it's become almost a standard.
Yeah, I think Leo Laporte, that works really great for him, and it works for all his guests too. Stuart Fairweather.
Plus, they're a nice company.
Stuart, go ahead.
It's not the NTG3, but the NTG2 that I have got a bit more experience with. One thing about Rode, especially with the NTG2, is they must have an aversion to using Loctite on the screws. So just be careful with some of the Rode products and make sure that the screws don't vibrate and it doesn't come apart in your hands.
Yeah, I will say invest in good mic support equipment because there's nothing worse as a voice talent to be in the middle of a script and start having to drift low because the microphone is, the boom arm wasn't locked down. Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, Bill, and you bring up a really, really good point, and I think everybody needs to realize this, is that the microphone is the one thing in your kit that's really not going to change very much. And spending the money on a good mic is well worth it because it can last you a very long time. And it's like getting good lenses for your camera. The camera is only as good as the lens that's on there. So as the front end of your system, buy the best mic that you can. Don't skimp.
Yeah, these also will hold value incredibly well. I mean, classic U87s and other Neumann condensers are worth sometimes 5-6 times what they were when they were new sold, and they've held their value incredibly well. All right, I think we've reached the end. Thank you all. Appreciate another office hours comes to the end. I hope everybody enjoyed it as much. It's amazing. We still have close to 100 people left watching after this much time. So thank you all. We'll be back tomorrow. Does anybody remember what tomorrow's theme is? I don't, because I wasn't paying attention to that yesterday. We have a theme
I believe
tomorrow.
he said lenses.
Lenses.
Yeah,
Thank
lenses.
you. Thank you, Guy. Okay, so we'll be talking about lenses tomorrow. We'll see you all on another edition. Thank you all for being here. What are you pointing down for, Sky?
I'm reaching out to Courtney and saying, see you in a few minutes.
Oh, okay, fair enough. And I'm going to hit the